Good morning. It is 9 a.m. and I will call this regular meeting of Elgin County Council to order. It is May the 9th, 2023. Look for a motion to adopt the minutes.
Be it resolved that the minutes of the meetings held on April 25th, 2023 and May 4th, 2023 be adopted.
Do I have a mover and seconder, please? Councillor Noble will move. Councillor Sloan will second. All in favor? That's carried. I would remind council of any disclosure of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof. And seeing none noted. Moving on with section 4, presenting petitions, presentations, and delegations. 4.1. This morning we have Kate Burns-Gallagher, the Western Ontario Wardens Caucus Executive Director, giving us a presentation on the Western Ontario Wardens Caucus. Good morning, Kate. Welcome.
Good morning, Warden. Through you to County Council. Lovely to see you all today. Thank you for the invitation. So I apologize, with the beautiful weather comes allergy season, so I do sound a little congested. So I am here today just to give you an overview of the Western Ontario Wardens Caucus and our strategic priorities for 2023-2024. I see some familiar faces, but there are also some new folks. So we wanted to just get out to all of our member community counties to let you know who we are and what we're up to this year. So as the warden alluded to, my name is Kate Burns-Gallagher, and I'm the Executive Director of the Western Ontario Wardens Caucus. I've been the Executive Director for a year. However, prior to that, I was with Elgin County for 14 years in the Economic Development Department. So who is the Western Ontario Wardens Caucus? We are the 16 upper and single tier municipalities. Up until about a month ago, we were 15, but Haldimand County is currently looking at membership with the organization. We represent 300 communities, more than 1.5 million residents, 1.5 million square kilometers, and 90% of our region is rural. And we represent 20% of the population of Ontario. So that's really key in our work. Next slide. Oh, that's a fun slide. Oh, if we go back one there. When we look at our whole region, this is what I borrowed from Steve Peters once. If you turn us sideways, you can see that we make an elephant. And unfortunately, Warden Milne and Grey County, Owen Sound is in an unfortunate position. Elgin is well placed, but unfortunately, Grey County, we send our condolences. Next slide. So the purpose of the Western Ontario Wardens Caucus is to really work together as that unified voice for the region and find those common threads within the 16 counties that we can work together to advocate to both the provincial and federal governments on. Although we are that huge region, as you saw in the elephant, there are many common themes and unique to Western Ontario versus Eastern Ontario, Central, or even Northern Ontario. So the Wardens Caucus came together in 2012 as an organization. And then in 2017, we added Chatham-Kent. And as I mentioned, just this year, Haldimand County is looking to become a member as well. So that's a little bit of history of the organization and why we work together, because that one voice is so powerful. Next slide. So our advocacy, we advocate in a number of different ways through meetings with ministers and senior government officials. So both at Roma and at AMO and throughout the year. Just back on April 14th, we met with our members of provincial and federal governments. Virtually, we brought them all together and released our strategic priorities to them. They got the first kick at the can to figure out what we're going to be talking to them or asking for this year. And we also monitor all of the government legislation that comes out. So as you may be familiar with, most recently, the changes to the provincial planning statement. So we're working on a regional response to that. A lot of impact to agricultural lots specifically on that. So we're working with our 15 regional planners on a response and what that impact looks like on our region. And last but not least, we work with an incredibly wide group of stakeholders in the region, including SWIFT, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, FCM, and Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus. We couldn't do it without them. We're really strong partners together. Next slide. So our 2023-2024 priorities. Not surprisingly, housing is one of our key priorities. As we know, housing affordability has become a critical issue across the world, but particularly in Ontario and even more so Western Ontario. And we've narrowed it down into very specific asks this year that we are approaching both the provincial and federal government on. So first, we are asking the federal government their definition of their promise of keeping municipalities whole. Minister Clark mentioned that in November when they decided to remove DCs, development charges. So we want to know what their promise is to keep municipalities whole means. And also, when it comes to the Building Homes Faster Act, the urban municipalities have been identified with this number of homes that they need to build, and they've had to make those pledges, but there's not been any correlating pledge for our rural counties. So we want to know what is our contribution and what is the province expecting from us. We've done a workforce and housing strategy. We know the numbers we need. We need 173,000 homes in Western Ontario by 2041 to meet our growing demand. But what does the province expect from us? So that's another question that we're coming to the table with this year on housing. Next. Next is workforce to support economic growth. And you'll notice all of our priorities are not really silos. They don't exist in and of themselves. They all interrelate because you can't attract a workforce if you don't have housing, and you can't build housing without a workforce. So the specific ask for our housing is on the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program. This is a program that brings immigrants into our communities specifically based on their skills. And I want to say 8 weeks ago, maybe 3 months ago, the province extended the number of occupations that qualify under the Ontario Nominee Program. However, they don't necessarily align specifically with the occupations that we need in Western Ontario. We have a job demand report that we can pull monthly to see the jobs that are required in Western Ontario every month. And month after month, retail is the #1 job required of our employers. And retail is not included on the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program. So that's what we're going to continue to push as we speak to the province for the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program to include those occupations that we need in our region. And thirdly, our last priority, our next slide, is mental health addictions and homelessness. This is a growing issue in our rural communities. In our rural communities, homelessness particularly is not necessarily visible. It's couch surfing, it's living in a car, it's not necessarily that visible piece versus walking downtown in an urban center. So what we're asking for is a dedicated rural stream as part of the homelessness prevention program. You may have heard about the funding announcement a week or two ago for London and Middlesex, that they received funding for that homelessness prevention program, and there was dedicated funds for Middlesex. So we are asking for permanent rural stream for that homelessness prevention fund. And we're working with our social service providers to indicate the increase in homelessness in our rural areas to show that we need that funding. So that is our third and last priority this year. So we're being very specific and very targeted on our asks this year so that we can also find actions and also have some positive consequences quickly. Now, broadband is not one of our showcase priorities, if you will, but it continues to be one of those items that we continue to work on behind the scenes. SWIFT will be wrapping up this fall, which we're quite excited about, and you can see the project results there. We had looked at a cell gap project, and that is something that is still in the works, and we'll be getting an update from Barry from SWIFT in the coming months on how that cell gap project is coming together. However, SWIFT will be wrapping up this fall with some great results in the region. Next slide. Last but not least, economic development. The Warrens Caucus undertook economic development back in 2017 with a regional strategy, and we've had great successes. And that economic development strategy spurred the work in workforce and housing, which has furthered on our advocacy with our housing. It's given us great data and great research and great information, not only just for our advocacy, but also for all of our member counties on how to work together and pulling different resources as well, and fueling their work. So the economic development work has been fantastic in bringing everybody together and improving the economic importance for the region. Next slide. So there's a small sampling of our regional partners. You can see we work with Workforce Planning West, Community Futures of Western Ontario is a critical partner. SCORE as well, we work really closely. SCORE represents 5 of our 16 counties. And so we make sure we align quite closely with SCORE. We also work with Ontario Big City Mayors, Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus, and the Association of Municipalities Ontario, and a number of other organizations that we've worked with on a project basis. Next slide. If you're looking for more information on what we do or staying on top of what we do, we have our website, we have our newsletters and press releases that you can sign up for. We are also on Twitter for the time being and Facebook. Next slide. So just a quick overview. As you are a member, what are those benefits? You have a seat at that regional table representing our rural communities, that real focus on rural. The advocacy to the provincial and federal government, not just at AMO and ROBA, but throughout the whole year. We're developing packages, we're developing information for the members of parliament, provincial parliament as well, so that we're staying on top of them, so that when they're talking to their counterparts in Queen's Park and on Parliament Hill, the MPs and MPPs are also advocating on our behalf. We also have staff support networks through our subject matter expert teams. So these subject matter expert teams are bringing information to the Wardens Caucus through our communications team. So you're well represented with Jessica Silcox there, through our planning department, our planning team, as well as our social services. So Heather Sheridan represents St. Thomas and Elgin on the social services team. And then the regional projects and resources, as I mentioned, that data is really critical. So we have an amazing Connect On tool that highlights all of the businesses in agriculture and manufacturing. And our newest rural housing information system that we're working on will provide great data on the housing in the region as well. So that is all I have for you today. It's been a pleasure to introduce the Western Ontario Wardens Caucus to some of you and to refresh for others. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for that presentation, Kate. Very informative and hopefully, it was well received. Does any member have any questions for Kate at this time?
Just
Yes.
a comment through you, Warden, that I knew I recognized Kate and then she had introduced herself. You used to do a video for the county and that puts it all back. So it's nice to see you again. And I recall your earlier work. So nice to see you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Anything additional? Yes, Councillor Jiguer.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Thank you, Kate, for the great presentation and update. I did want to just clarify regarding SWIFT, because so as you may know, I'm the new appointee and we had our first board meeting just a couple of weeks ago. And because the terms of SWIFT is wrapping up, is being used by the end of the year. So that's causing a little bit of confusion. So all the projects that were planned are being completed on time and on budget. So that is the good news. But it should be clear that all projects have a 7-year ownership agreement with them. So SWIFT must exist in some form until at least 2030. So there has to be a board, there has to be, so in what shape SWIFT will exist. So it will be up to this board to decide, but it's not. So I think because everybody's saying SWIFT is wrapping up, that's caused that confusion. So to be determined. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification, Councillor Jiguer. Seeing nothing further, Jenna, please.
Be it resolved that the presentation from the Executive Director of the Western Ontario Wardens Caucus be received and filed.
Thank you. Mover and seconder, Deputy Warden Jones and Councillor Jiguer. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Moving on with 4.2, we have Karen Davies, President and CEO, Peter Vanderwesten, Board of Directors Chair, and Dan Ross, Board of Directors, First Vice Chair for the St. Thomas Elgin General Hospital presentation. Good morning and welcome. Good morning. I'm very pleased to at the start of this time make a brief presentation updating
information on your hospital. That is very important to all of us. You've preempted by the members of the people who are here, but I'll just have them stand for a moment. So Karen Davies, our CEO President of the hospital, Tanya Sheldon, Vice President and Chief Financial Officer, and Dan Ross, Vice Chair of the Board. As you know, we have not been here for at least 3 years, given the situation with COVID, but we believe that it's essential that we stay in touch and keep you apprised of where things are at the hospital on an annual basis. So we look forward to presenting in the near future on a yearly basis. So I will call on our President and CEO to start, please.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and I was appointed in the middle of the pandemic, so I have not had the pleasure of being here before, but I look forward to being here more in the future. And I'll try and keep it tight. It's hard to be limited to talk about the hospital. We're all very passionate about it. You want to just pop to the next slide? It has been through the pandemic, has been a really difficult time. And I would say that collectively, we've all been through that trauma together. We've certainly seen society change a significant amount since the pandemic came, from the days of lockdown closures. Then you start to see some of that societal rise of issues against vaccine, the occupation of Ottawa, increasing violence. You just heard more about homelessness, mental health, and addiction. And those are all issues that are facing the hospital as well, particularly the issue of mental health, addictions, and violence. And so if we don't touch on it through there, know that that's a significant issue for us right now. On the slide right now, you have our mission, vision, and values. These were done in 2018. We just refreshed our strategic objectives. But the mission, vision, and values of the hospital were done in a very strong collaborative way with the community of Elgin. They've held strong through the pandemic, and they'll keep us going for the next little bit as we continue on this resiliency journey of healthcare right now. Want to flip to the next slide? We're a medium-sized hospital. And so if you're not sure what that is, hospitals in Ontario are ranked by their size. Sometimes it's because of their geographical location. So there's small, northern, rural, medium, academic hospitals. So we're in the cusp there of really, for St. Thomas Elgin General, we're a high volume emergency department hospital, which means we see close to the volumes that University Hospital sees in London, just for some perspective of size. Usually means you're geographically isolated. We're the only hospital in Elgin County, which has some perks and some challenges. We get referrals in from the smaller hospitals around us. We help them out. That might be Strathroy, Tillsonburg, Ingersoll. And then we refer in and out from London as well. Sometimes medium-sized hospitals have challenges with recruitment, whether it's professional staff, physicians, nursing, allied health. We've been blessed that we haven't had that challenge yet. As I say that, the entire province is struggling around physician resources, and that might be primary care in the community, anesthesiology as an example within the walls of the hospital. So it's something that we keep a really close eye on. Because of our size of our hospital, we function a lot more independently than smaller hospitals might. And if you'll flip to the next slide, you'll see there an array of all of the services that we offer at our hospital. It is a full service hospital, 24/7 operations. We have not been touched with the issue of having to close emergency departments, as you've seen in a lot of hospitals in the province. And that's not just by luck, it's through a lot of hard work and a very committed and dedicated medical team that we have in St. Thomas. The only programs you don't see here on our list would be the specialty programs, so the high cost, low volume programs, such as burn programs, dialysis, neurosurgery, cardiac surgery, although cardiac surgery is a higher volume. And we still have some of those programs on our wish list for the future. So if you think of dialysis, we know that there's a lot of residents in Elgin County who have and need dialysis. Again, it's an expensive, low volume, high cost, but if you know just one person who needs it, you know the significance of depending on dialysis. And the stroke unit was the last unit that our last program that was added to our hospital in 2017. Next slide. So the North Tower, you'll see that that's the newer building that's on the north side of just facing Elm Street. That opened in 2018. It's an amazing building. but it's only part of our campus. And so what's in that building is the new emergency department, sterile processing, the operating rooms, and the mental health unit. So mental health is a Schedule I facility. It was new to St. Thomas in 2015. And so it's housed in the new building as well. But what's important to remember is that most of the care that happens at that campus is in the oldest part of the building. So all of the inpatient beds, the pharmacy, the lab, all of those critical services are still functioning in a really old and dated building. And you can imagine the risks that come with that is, beyond infrastructure failure, but no private bathrooms, a lot privacy is an issue in general, and accessibility issues can be there. So I'm going to flip to the next slide. And I think I'm going to hand it back to our board chair, Peter, for the next section.
Thank you. Who do we serve? Strong communities build strong hospitals, but we can't do it in isolation. It's a partnership to be successful and to provide the citizens of our communities with the healthcare services. To be successful, we need to understand the health issues of our population and the communities we are privileged to serve. Next slide, please. Elgin County is our attributed population of about 70,000 residents. With 220 new households annually from 2016 to 2021, we know that we are on the cusp of a boom. 2 years ago, the population growth rate was 2.2% higher than the rest of Ontario. Most populated areas are St. Thomas, Central Elgin, Malahide, and Aylmer. Based on ministry population data and statistics, Canada's 2016 census of the population showed some characteristics of our population that were different from the average in Ontario. As an example, our residents tend to be older than the rest of Ontario. Perhaps we're just living longer because it's a good, healthy place to grow up and have a family. We have seen and continue to see a drift of patients from London Middlesex using our hospital as well. So our reputation gets around, and we have a very, very fine hospital. Next slide, please. This slide shows the Elgin County long-term population forecast from 2021 to 2046. This data shows a projection to increase from 97,500 to 125,000 by 2046. Now then, as we all know, this is now outdated by the recent announcement of the Volkswagen facility. That is going to change all the numbers in our areas. So it is our responsibility that we need to assure that we have a hospital that supports the community growth. Next slide, please. This slide shows the numbers at STEG. You can see it's a very busy, high volume hospital, a significant resource to Elgin County and beyond. For context, STEG sees just about as many patients as University Hospital in London, and we are growing year over year in our statistics. Next slide, please. This slide also shows the hospital performance, particularly as we move through COVID. STEG played a key role in the management and containment of COVID in our county. The COVID Assessment Center was located on our site to serve Elgin County, and it was just closed in April. STEG supported not only the region, but many other areas of Ontario and, in fact, Manitoba. During those times, we had surges where ICUs in other areas could not handle the volumes, and we were able to assist. There are very few hospitals in Ontario that have pediatric units. STEG is one of that does. And we were able to increase our capacity by 50% to support London, Middlesex, and Oxford as well. I'd next like to call on Tanya to make the next presentation.
Morning, everybody. Next slide, please. So the key challenges and risks for STEG right now, and a lot of it's been alluded to from my colleagues here, but we are continuing to see patients coming from London and Middlesex, right? So as a hospital, when we're the #1 ED in the province, we tend to get that creep where we're getting people coming from other regions to use our ED because it is quicker, it is faster, and we're serving our patients a little bit quicker. So we're continuing to see year over year growth in our ED from those outside of Elgin County. One of the big things that we should be proud of is before the pandemic, we all heard about hallway medicine, and our hospital continues to be #1 in ED wait time and bringing people out of that emerge department up to a room. We do not do hallway medicine at STEG. We bring that patient up from the ED and get them into their room so they can be cared for in proper space. You can hear it on the news. All the emergency departments across the province are struggling with increased volumes, hallway medicine, et cetera. And a lot of them have to deal with shortages of manpower, right? You hear about a lot of rural EDs closing down because they don't have the medical staff, they don't have the nursing, et cetera. Knock on wood, we don't have that problem. We have a fantastic group of professionals that work in our organization that really want to see our organization be successful and serve our patients as they need to be served. Next slide. Some other challenges that we have currently at STEG is ALC, alternative level of care. We have over 20% of our hospital is filled right now. So if we take a look at, it's about 30 to 35 patients in our hospital this morning that do not need to be there. Why? Because if we take a look at that continuum of care, we need resources in the community to make sure that these patients can be cared for safely outside of an acute care hospital. So when we take a look at that, and it's across the province as well, STEG is not unique, but when we take a look at that rate, such as 20+% of the population of the hospital, that's where you see a lot of the hospitals struggling to get patients out of the emerge department and into a bed. We have an aging infrastructure. So our hospital, I think many of you might have known the Amaza Wood Hospital. Well, that's how the STEG started. And so we opened up our doors in 1954. So we're almost at 70 years as an old infrastructure. And to try to do modern medicine in a building that's 70 years old is very difficult, right? So we continue to have, we continue to invest in infrastructure. But you never know what's going to happen. You never know what's behind that door of a 70-year-old wall, right? So critical failure, we're the only hospital in Elgin County, so we can't afford to have a critical failure in our hospital. So continuing to invest and keep the lights on a 70-year-old building is quite difficult. Next slide. So some of the critical pressures that we're facing right now, well, as one of my colleagues alluded to, we have significant economic growth in St. Thomas. The building around us is phenomenal. The announcement of the Volkswagen plant, where we're going to see over 5,000 new employees coming into the region and all of the resources required for that. And we have limited bedded capacity. With a 70-year-old building, we are using every nook and cranny we can in our hospital to find spaces for patients. So we do not have any extra space. As my colleagues alluded to in the presentation just before us, the increased mental health and addictions problems in our county. We're continuing to see that increasing. And that has an effect on the hospital. We need to help these people, but we're running out of rooms and ways to do that. And aging infrastructure, I've already mentioned, and we're landlocked. For those of you who know where the hospital is, we're kind of right in the middle of a residential area and we're landlocked. We have nowhere to go. As we increase our services and see the increase in all of the volumes, where are these people going to park, right? We're running out of parking spaces. So something as basic as parking is a daily issue at our hospital. Next slide. And you can see here, this is just a nice yearly graph here on on our occupancy rate, you can see that year over year, you can just see that we're increasing. So our surgery unit in 2017 started at 83%, and we're now 104% utilization in our surgery. Our acute medical, we started at 89% in 2017, and we ended the year at 119% occupancy. Like, that is a dramatic increase on our patient rooms. Our ED continues to increase, and our acute care admissions, it's kind of blocked there, but I think we're over 7,700 admissions last year through our acute hospital portion. And I think that's it, and I'll turn it over to my colleague, Dan Ross.
Thank you, Tanya. Next slide, please. I get the fun part of this in the sense that we're going to take a wee look at the future and what that future holds for our region and for our hospital. And I think part of building a future is setting a solid foundation. And as you've heard previously, I think we're in a very good position to look to the future of healthcare in Elgin County and St. Thomas, and particularly at Steg. A few things have happened that most of us are aware of. We're coming out of a pandemic that gripped us for 3 years. But that pandemic for us has been also a learning experience. And I don't think ever in my lifetime have I seen information, education, and communication change and shape the behavior of a community the way that COVID did. We kept people out of hospital. We kept people healthy. And that was critical to really the future of our community. Perhaps most importantly, we kept people alive. And so part of that foundation that we want to build for the future is learning from the past, and we will learn from the pandemic. But we've also got some very solid things to think about when we look at our hospital, and they've been mentioned in part already by some of our presenters. Steg at this point in time is one of the best hospitals in the province, if not the best hospital in the province, for emergency department times, for time to bed from emergency. We are the leading lean hospital, which is a measure of effectiveness and efficiency in our hospital in the province. And we've had a number of very exciting developments over the recent future. You've heard about, over the recent past, rather, you've heard about the new tower. It was opened in 2018. Next slide, please. But we've also now have a new chemotherapy unit that sees approximately 55 patients a week and is dead on with the theme of treating people closer to home. No longer do people have to jump in their car and go to London for chemotherapy treatment. A lot of that treatment could now be provided in St. Thomas. Next slide, please. We have new laboratory space. It's shelled in the North Tower and will come to fruition in the next year. And I think perhaps trite to say that laboratories are fundamental to what we do as a hospital. It allows us to find causes more quickly. It allows us to process treatment and is critical to the future of our hospital. Next slide, please. And perhaps most exciting is we've now been approved for a new MRI. And I think we all know that people have traveled all over the province of Ontario trying to get an MRI on a timely basis. We're now going to have it in our own backyard. And that will really be fundamental in the treatment of cancers and the treatment of soft tissue injuries, any number of things, trauma, that will make the service at our hospital even better than it is now. And I think the other development that has been mentioned already, but is really noteworthy, is of course the announcement of the new VW plant. And that is more than just jobs and economy when you look at it through the hospital. It has really shone the light on our hospital and made a lot of people in government at both the provincial and federal level aware of our community much more than they were before. And it fits very well with our plans for growth. We have made an application to the provincial government for a master planning grant, which allows us to look at the future of our hospital and healthcare and what it needs to look like. And we don't know what the outcome of that will be. It may be a new hospital. It may be a substantially renovated and reinvented hospital on the site we are now. But the one thing we know for sure, that given our occupancies, given the trends, given the expectations that will arise from ordinary growth, ordinary aging, and then adding the VW plant, we are going to have very real capacity issues. And our goal is to respond to those as quickly as we possibly can. Healthcare is changing in front of our eyes. We're now concentrating on keeping people out of hospital. There's a greater onus on people and families to keep themselves healthy. That's part of the future of healthcare. But the hospital will always be the critical part. It will also always be the revolving part. And we need to make sure that we're part of a continuum of care that is very effective and works every day for our communities. And the key word that I want to leave you with here, and the reason we're here today, is really alignment. We need to be aligned with our communities. We need to be aligned with you. We need to be aligned with St. Thomas. We need to be aligned with all the people that need and will avail themselves of our services. So we are thrilled to be here today after about 3 years to bring you up to date on what's happening with our hospital. We really want to do this on a regular basis, I think no less than yearly, and to bring you up to date as things happen, which I think are going to be exciting for our community. And I want to issue an invitation to all of you, either collectively or individually, to contact Karen, contact me, contact any one of us. We'd love to give you a tour of our hospital, because seeing it is always better than any description that we can give it. And we look forward to being in partnership. I think it's a time that we all need to pull together. We all need to think about healthy communities, because healthy communities make a lot of things happen. We can attack homelessness, we can attack mental health, but we'll attack them best when we're a healthy and an aware community. So thank you for your time, and I'll pass it back to Peter to wrap up.
Okay, I would invite you to ask any questions of us if you like, if you have questions.
Peter, thank you very much for that, and thank your colleagues as well for the excellent update. As was mentioned, it's been some time since we've had an opportunity to hear from you folks at St. Thomas Elgin General Hospital, and so it was most welcome. I'm going to turn it over to council. Does anyone have any questions for our delegation today? Councillor Sloan.
Thank you, through you, Warden. You mentioned the Volkswagen plant, and you mentioned the opportunities and the increase challenges with respect to more people coming to the community, and that's going to be schools and that's going to be hospitals. You've also talked about the current site being landlocked. You built a tower in 2018. Just a quick question about the future with respect to growth potential. Also, the word campus was used. Is there a longer term vision of what happens on the Elm Street property? Is there, if you're landlocked, you have a couple of options. One, buying some land for parking, or buying some land for ancillary services. I just was curious about going forward. If the hospital, which you mentioned is 70 years old, what with respect to real estate are you looking at in the mid to longer term? Thank you.
Yep, good question. Well, the Ministry of Health has a process, and the first step is a master plan that has been alluded to by other presenters. We've had an application in for quite a few years now, and with the announcement of the Volkswagen plant, I believe that it will facilitate a much quicker response from the ministry. But it all starts there, Andrew. We cannot foresee or predict where this study will take us. But the typical process is that we hire consultants, a team of consultants. They do a very exhaustive study of the existing hospital, its conditions, its opportunities, the site, and it will explore other sites. For example, possibly part of the psych hospital site would be a candidate, and there may be others. One of the key things to get approval as we go forward from the master plan is to have a solid role for the existing site if we in fact go to a new site. And so all those plans will be looked at, but it will be part of the ministry's process. Okay.
Any further questions? Yes, Councillor Cookett.
Thank you, Mr. Warden, through you. The province has has spent a great deal of time and money on the development of the Ontario health teams, which are supposed to provide a continuum of care that is more efficient than the LHINs have provided. What role has the hospital, what role is the hospital playing in the Ontario health team process?
I'll ask Karen to address that. She's been in a leadership position on that.
Thank you. That's a really good question. And it's timely. And so the Ontario health teams did replace the structure of the LHINs. And as much as it's into the fourth year now, just remind you that this was a volunteer process. And so Ontario Health presented it to communities to voluntarily come together to create these teams. That's been one of the hallmark challenges of this, is it was never mandated and pushed. So we've got a bit of a fruit salad of variation across the province right now of what Ontario Health teams look like. In our region here, we had one LHIN. We now have 14 Ontario healthcare teams. And so you can see how that makes it actually a little bit more difficult. What we've done is focused in on Elgin County. And so the Elgin Ontario Health Team, the hospital took a lead role in getting that up and getting it stood up, starting out with the whole beginnings of it. And so we're just now 2 years into having this in place. We have an executive director, and the hospital has just now handed off. So I was the co-chair. We've handed off the leadership to 2 co-chairs within the community. The intention is that it's not a hospital-run piece, but it needs to be a community-based piece. All Ontario health teams in the province are struggling right now. There's about 3 in the entire province that are really starting to make some headway. We are hopeful that within the next 2 months, there'll be some direction from Ontario Health and the ministry around better guidelines, better implementation plans for that to move forward. My focus right now is the critical piece of, we have acute care, we have primary care, we have home care, and we have long-term care home. All of those need to be together and stop working in our silos. Peter's already alluded to the need to have a healthy community. We can't build a healthy community in silos. And so our focus right now is really trying to harness the power of those 4 main groups as a beginning place. Does that answer your question? Okay, you're welcome.
Anything further? Well, again, thank you very much to you and your colleagues for being here this morning. And we certainly enjoyed the presentation.
Okay, thank you very much.
Jenna?
Be it resolved that the presentation from the St. Thomas Elgin General Hospital Board be received and filed.
Do I have a mover and seconder, please? Councillor Whitner will move. Councillor Hentz will second. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Section 5, Committee of the Whole.
Be it resolved that we do now move into Committee of the Whole.
Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Noble and Councillor Sloan will second. All in favor? That's carried. Section 6, reports of council, outside boards and staff. 6.1 is the Warden's activity report for April of 2023 and upcoming community flag raisings and proclamations. Council, the report is before you. It lists a number of activities that I have attended on behalf of council. And in addition, there are a couple of proclamation requests and flag raising events. One is the elder abuse Elgin, and which we have not done before, I believe. And the second is the Pride flag raising in August. This is before council because council's decision whether to proceed or not. So I would entertain your thoughts. Deputy Warden Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Proceed.
Okay. Thank you. Jenna?
Be it resolved that the report titled Warden's Activity Report, April 2023, and upcoming community flag raisings and proclamations dated May 1st, 2023 from Warden Ketchiba be received and filed, and that County Council support the proclamation and flag raising requests from Elder Abuse Elgin and Elgin County Pride for 2023.
Do I have a mover and seconder for that motion? Councillor Sloan will move. Councillor Cookett will second. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Moving on to 6.2, Acting Manager of Planning, Willow Run Draft Plan of Subdivision and Draft Plan of Condominium, file number 34T-AY 22001 and 34CD-AY 22002. Good morning, Paul.
Good morning, Warden. How are you today?
We are outstanding.
Very good, very good. With your permission, I'll start right into a description of the applications that are before County Council today. As you had noted, what is before County Council is a draft plan of subdivision and a draft plan of condominium that are both located in the town of Elmer, and they're both associated with each other. So the condominium application is embedded within the plan of subdivision. This particular plan would see the creation of 55 single detached building lots, 16 semi-detached building lots, 70 row house building lots, and 44 condominium style townhouse units. So this is quite an extensive development that would be constructed within Elmer. Both plans went through the standard development review process. Of particular note for council's consideration is CN's review of this proposed development. CN has appealed the associated zoning bylaw amendment that was enacted by the town of Elmer. That is not associated necessarily with County Council's decision, but I'm certainly noting it because it's an associated application. But County Council's decision on these two files is completely independent of that. Because of the appeal that was received on the zoning bylaw amendment, staff conducted some extensive consultations and discussions with CN in an attempt to ensure that when we were taking both the subdivision and the condominium applications before County Council, that CN was satisfied with that, that their concerns had been addressed within the draft conditions. As such, this matter was originally intended to be brought before Council at the last Council meeting, but those negotiations, or I shouldn't say negotiations, those discussions with CN continued on until for an additional week. At this time, I'm certainly satisfied that CN's concerns have been addressed in the draft conditions. The draft conditions have been reviewed by both the applicant, and we have concurrence from the applicant, and they have also been reviewed by CN solicitors, and we've received general concurrence from CN solicitors. If I could be quite frank, kind of as much concurrence as I think we could expect from CN solicitors on the matter. As such, what I have before council today is a recommendation for an approval of both the subdivision and the condominium, subject to the conditions that are attached to the staff report.
Thank you for that report, Paul. Does anyone have any questions? Councillor Cook?
Just a comment. Mic is on. Just comment that this is of course, a large development and certainly needed in the town of Elmer. We're looking at there's all kinds of lists for apartments, and this particular development has a wide range of different types of housing, including affordable housing. So it's certainly a needed kind of development. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. If there isn't anything further, Jenna, please.
Be it resolved that the Council of the Corporation of the County of Elgin grants draft plan approval to draft plan of subdivision by CJDL Consulting Engineers on behalf of Performance Communities Realty Incorporated and dated October 28th, 2022. And that the Council of the Corporation of the County of Elgin grants draft plan approval to draft plan of condominium by CJDL Consulting Engineers on behalf of Performance Communities Realty Incorporated and dated October 28th, 2022. And that staff be directed to provide notice of these decisions subject to the conditions of final approval in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act.
Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Latham will move. Councillor Cookett will second. All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Thank you. 6.3, Acting Manager of Planning, modification to draft plan, approved plan of subdivision, file number 34T-BY 2201. Paul?
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Council may recall reviewing this application and providing draft approval to it in February of this past year. This is a development that's located, a plan of subdivision that's located in the municipality of BAM. What has happened is we have the county has granted draft approval to the plan of subdivision. This is quite a common occurrence that does happen during the draft approval process. But the applicants have now gone into detailed design on their stormwater management pond and have discovered through the analysis that they need to enlarge the block that that will contain the stormwater management pond. And that's meant that some of the lot lines in the draft approved plan of subdivision need to shift to accommodate the slightly larger stormwater management pond, which I understand the size is the increase in size is due to a need for increased fire protection for the proposed plan of subdivision. As such, the applicants have applied for what's known as a red line revision. So a red line revision is when council has granted draft approval to a plan of subdivision, but a modification is needed before a final approval is given. So we're modifying simply the draft plan. In this case, no additional lots are being proposed. This really is an administrative red line revision where some of the lots are simply shifting to accommodate a larger stormwater management block. The application has been reviewed by the municipality of BAM, and they have provided their concurrence on it. Certainly, from our perspective as county staff, we don't take any issue with the proposed amendments. Again, noting they are quite administrative or technical in nature, and as such, I am recommending an approval before council today.
Well, thank you for that report, Paul. Does anyone have any questions, concerns? Nick, please.
Good morning, Paul. I actually just had a technical procedural question for you. So just to clarify, because it's not in the recommendations, no notice would need to be provided because it's a minor revision. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you for that. Anything further? Okay, Jenna, please.
Be it resolved that the Council of the Corporation of the County of Elgin grants approval to the revised draft plan of subdivision as prepared by CJDL Limited on behalf of 1128 Properties Incorporated and dated April 21st, 2023, and that staff be directed to provide notice of this decision subject to the conditions of final approval in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act.
Do I have a mover and seconder, please? Deputy Warden Jones and Councillor Hentz. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Moving on with 6.4, Acting Manager of Planning, Draft 2023 Provincial Policy Statement. This could be a bigger one, Paul.
It's a hot topic indeed, everywhere. Thank you, Mr. Warden. County administration asked that I prepare a summary report for County Council's considerations, highlighting the changes to the draft 2023 provincial policy statement. As Council is likely aware and may be aware, the provincial policy statement is the province of Ontario's statement of land use policy. So it encapsulates all of the provincial interests that the province of Ontario has in land use planning. It is a policy document that has statutory authority under the Planning Act, and this is what makes it so important for all lower and upper tier municipalities, as all planning and public works decisions that are made in municipalities across Ontario must be consistent with the policies that are contained within the provincial policy statement. The province of Ontario undertook a review of the provincial policy statement in 2020 and is subsequently undertaking a second review of the provincial policy statement at this time. The commenting period on the provincial policy statement is open. Should council decide they wish to provide a submission. Certainly, we heard earlier that the Western Ontario Wardens Caucus is preparing a submission to the province of Ontario. So this the report that I have before you today is simply summarizing some of the key changes that are proposed in the provincial policy statement. If I were to draw your attention to page 2 of the report, I've highlighted and bulleted the major changes that affect and in some cases don't affect the County of Elgin, but are still major changes being considered. So to highlight them and walk council through them, the first major change would be currently municipalities in Ontario are required to plan for up to 25 years of residential and employment growth. The province is proposing to change that to say that municipalities in Ontario must plan for at least 25 years of residential and employment growth in their municipalities. There is also, council may be familiar with the term a comprehensive review. This is a large study that municipalities must undertake in order to consider expansions to urban boundaries. These are quite large and complex studies. The province of Ontario is examining removing the requirement for a comprehensive review out of the provincial policy statement altogether. So that wouldn't be replaced with another study. The requirement to conduct this review would simply be removed, and it would be up to the local municipality or the county of Elgin to determine what criteria or what analysis would be required to consider an urban boundary expansion. The next would be the government of Ontario is noting that they are still supportive of intensification and redevelopment in urban areas, but municipalities are now simply required to support intensification and redevelopment rather than required to accommodate it. There have been some slight changes to the policies with respect to employment uses, which are essentially industrial areas across the county. In this case, there's some greater flexibility in terms of protection of these employment areas, and the definition of what constitutes an employment area has been clarified. Probably one of the largest and most talked about proposed changes to the PPS would be the removal of long-standing prohibitions on land division in the agricultural area. As I'm sure many members of council are aware, currently at this time, the only residential lot creation that's permitted in the agricultural area is what they refer to as a surplus farm dwelling severance. So that's a dwelling that has become surplus to the needs of a farmer from the consolidation of a number of farm parcels. The province of Ontario is currently considering allowing up to 3 residential lots on a farm lot. And that would also it also is stipulated in the draft PPS that no local municipality or county could prohibit or restrict that lot creation. So that's not a permissive regulation. It would have to be permitted across the board, regardless of where you're located. I'd also note that the current PPS, they do note that there are no changes to the natural heritage or the environmental policies of the PPS at this time, but the province has indicated that they are reviewing those. So we can anticipate likely further amendments or changes to the 2023 PPS once they've reviewed the natural heritage policies. I would note for council that a number of the definitions, natural heritage definitions, so things like wetlands, woodlands, etc., those definitions have been removed from the PPS. The next item that I note for council is that the infrastructure and servicing policies, which are usually I'll say a hot topic or a topic of interest to a lot of local councils, they're not changing substantively. There's no real changes that we've seen with those. So the hierarchy of services that currently exists within the PPS that favors full municipal servicing, private communal, private individual on-site, and then partial services, that hierarchy is not proposed to be changed in the PPS. And finally, I'd note for council, there are a number of changes that if you are reviewing the document, you might note deal with the Greater Toronto area, the Greater Golden Horseshoe area, and what they refer to as large or growing municipalities. This is kind of a new category or a policy framework that's being introduced into the PPS, but doesn't concern the city of St. Thomas or any of Elgin County's local municipalities. This is a substantial change, and I've been practicing as a planner since about 2001, 2002. I started under the first iteration of the 1996 PPS. I would consider this to be one of the most substantial changes that I've seen to provincial policy in my planning career. So just highlighting that for council. I've also highlighted on page 3 of the report some of county staff's perspectives with respect to the changes. Certainly with respect to the growth management changes, need for comprehensive review, urban boundary expansions, etc. This will certainly provide some greater flexibility for local councils and county to consider urban boundary expansions. I would note that there's going to be likely some additional pressures that will be put on both local councils and county council to consider urban boundary expansions, as well as to consider expansions to infrastructure to service those. So while we are getting some some greater flexibility to consider these, we're likely going to, on the opposite end of the spectrum, receive additional pressure, and we won't have a provincial policy framework to guide us through that. We're going to have to develop our own frameworks to review those requests. With respect to the agricultural lot creation policies, I'm providing certainly my position as a professional land use planner. I would have some significant concerns with what are being proposed by the province. I note that the Ontario Federation of Agriculture has also come out against these proposed changes. My concerns primarily relate to conflicting land use, the urbanization of the countryside, as well as restrictions on normal farm practices that these conflicting land uses can create. Other than that, I would note that most of the other changes that are proposed at this time will likely have limited impact on counties' day-to-day planning operations, and I'd suggest have limited impact on many of the day-to-day operations of the local municipalities. With that, I'll pass the microphone back over to you, Mr. Warden. I would again note that the commenting period for the new PPS is June 5th. If County Council would like to make a submission, but I'm certainly happy to entertain any questions that Council may have with respect to the changes.
Thank you, Paul, for that presentation. And there are a number of concerns from my perspective. The first one, of course, the removal of the requirement for whether you call it a comprehensive study or a growth plan or whatever you wish. It does, in my mind, create opportunity, but it also creates challenges because not only the county, but our local municipal partners are going to have to come up with their own criteria on how to judge this. And that sounds like an inconsistent approach across the province. So it's going to create some challenges for us. The second one, and I would agree with you that the creation of 3 lots on agricultural property is concerning, to say the least. I did note within Osler's report that they're suggesting that there'd be a prohibition, I think, on classes 1, 2, and 3 soils, but it still opens it up for the 4, 5, and 6, and 7, in the Canada Land Inventory. It still seems counterintuitive to the argument of preserving agricultural resources and yet opening up the opportunity to create, as you said, urbanization in the rural landscape. Those are just my comments, and I'm going to open up the council for either questions and or comments. Deputy Warden Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Yeah, I would echo your comments. Absolutely. This is going to turn into a nightmare, I think, for some of us. It's already started for me. So with regards to the rural landscape and the 3 lots, this is through you to Paul. My understanding was it can't be on arable land that's isn't in production right now. Is that correct?
The way that the policy is written through you, Mr. Warden, is that that agricultural lands are to be avoided. The policy is quite a high level policy. So certainly, as Mr. Warden has pointed out, the Osler, the law firm that prepared the side-by-side comparison of both PPSs, they've noted what they consider to be a prohibition. I would put forward that some of that has yet to be fleshed out about how this is going to be implemented in the long run. So typically what does happen with all of the policies of the PPS is a new policy comes in, and then subsequently each ministry that's associated with that policy, in this case, Ontario Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs, would develop implementation guidelines to help implement that policy. So at this point, we're in a little bit of an implementation vacuum in that we don't know how the ministry intends to see these policies implemented. So generally, we know that that locating these new residential lots on prime agricultural land will at least in some form be discouraged. But whether or not it's an outright prohibition, I would suggest still is yet to be seen.
Just to follow up, I think for any of the farmers in the room, they have a pretty good idea how to take land out of production.
Yes. Additional comments, Councillor Hens.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. The Council of Dutton Dunwich
felt, and we had a delegation at Roma to the Ministry of Rural Affairs and Housing, that rural lot creation was too restrictive. Mere technicalities prevented us from creating new lots in Dutton Dunwich. So we wanted more flexibility at the municipal level, and we made our views known. But I think when you get from too restrictive, and now it's gone too far the other way. 3 rural lots, and I've heard a lot of farmers in my area quite concerned about that, and rightly so. So I don't think this thing is done yet, Paul, and we can offer our suggestions yet, and Dutton Dunwich will make a submission in this regard. Thank you, Mr. Warden.
Thank you for those comments. Councillor Shiger.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Yeah, that would be my wish, that the county puts its own submission. So I understand there'll be one at the regional level through the Warden's Caucus, but I think it helps that I think everybody should submit their comments. So hopefully we can coordinate something at the county level.
Thank you for those comments. Anyone else? Okay, Paul, just to clarify, you had mentioned that you have capacity to draft a response to the ministry on this, outlining the concerns that I think that you've already identified. The 2 primary ones, again, for me, are the comprehensive review, and the other one is the agricultural severances. But I'm open to include, broadening the list if there's something there that council thinks that we need to include. You've done a very good job of identifying the concerns, and I'd be quite comfortable in proceeding in that vein. Yes, Councillor Cookett.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Warden, through you.
And Councillor Latham will second. All in favor? That's carried. Confirming bylaw?
Be it a first, second, and third read of bylaw number 23-23, being a bylaw to confirm proceedings of the Municipal Council of the Corporation of the County of Elgin at the May 9th, 2023 meeting.
Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Sloan, Councillor Cookett. All in favor? That's carried, which brings us to the adjournment motion.
Be it resolved that we do now adjourn at 12:19 PM to meet again on May 25th or 23rd, 2023 at 9:00 AM.
Okay. Mover and seconder, Councillor Whitner, Councillor Cookett. All in favor? And it's carried.